Amidst the desolate ruins of Myrnorad, just 12 kilometers from the choke point of Pokrovsk, a metallic ghost loomed forward. It was the Turtle Tank, an obsolete T-62 iron mass welded shut inside a crude steel shell, looking like nothing more than a mobile warehouse plodding through the death zone. Paradoxically, in a war where up to 1,300 drones and 1,400 guided bombs rain down every week, the final hope for a breakthrough rests on the shoulders of a rudimentary welded machine. Why do the Russians rely on a Soviet-era relic to challenge Ukraine's sophisticated defense network? Will thick steel overcome technology? But on a battlefield where GPS is disabled and video feeds can collapse at any moment, steel armor may not be the best protection for Russian tank crews. In the fierce, seesaw battles of the East, the appearance of turtle tanks is not a technological advancement, but a scream of desperation. To cope with the absolute dominance of FPV drones in the sky, the Russian command has made a grim trade-off, sacrificing all offensive power in exchange for a fragile chance of survival. Let us look deep into the structure of this monster. An obsolete T-62, which should belong in a museum, is now encased in crude welded steel plates, forming a heavy shell. But the price to be paid is too high. When that steel shell is lowered, it simultaneously neutralizes a tank's most critical weapons: maneuverability and visibility. The turret is locked tight, unable to rotate to react to threats from the flanks. The optical observation systems are obscured, turning the crew into blind occupants of a mobile iron coffin. From a king of the battlefield, the Turtle Tank has now become a blunt tool, a plodding mass of iron that only knows how to move forward in the hope that its armor is thick enough to withstand enemy strikes. The mistake does not stop at the design, it lies in the tactical mindset. Observing images from reconnaissance drones, we see a formation moving in an extremely narrow column convoy. This is exactly a single point of failure. Why would they take such a risk? The answer lies in the utter fear of Ukraine's dense minefields. The Russian army has been imprisoned in narrow corridors, forced to follow one another tail to nose along cleared paths. They wager the entire fate of a unit on the lead vehicle and the electronic warfare (EW) system mounted on its roof. Overconfidence in these jamming devices has created an illusion of safety. Russian commanders believe that a protective dome of radio waves can block all drone incursions. But they have forgotten a fundamental principle of war: no system is invulnerable. Relying on a single route and a rigid formation has turned the attack into a death parade. They are walking straight into a script, carefully prepared by the opponent. An old academic rut in the middle of a battlefield that changes by the second. When the locomotive is taken out, the entire train will be blown to pieces. That is a grim truth that those sitting inside the steel shells seem not to have realized yet. In the while, the Russians believe that steel shells and jamming waves are enough. The Ukrainian army is quietly preparing a trap not just with explosives, but with psychological manipulation. Everything begins with ghosts in the dark, Ukrainian engineering teams. They do not lay mines randomly or densely in a blockade style. Instead, they employ a tactic military circles call shaping the battlefield. Imagine the battlefield as a raging torrent, and engineers are the ones building dikes to steer that flow right into the mouth of the abyss. They work silently under the cover of night, placing TM-62 anti-tank minefields at bottlenecks and along the straightest, easiest to travel roads. What is the purpose? To force Russian commanders into a choice: either risk crossing a known death zone or turn into side paths that seem safer but are actually gateways leading straight to hell. These turnoffs are intentionally left open by Ukraine, creating the illusion of a gap in the defensive system, baiting the hungry iron turtles to advance deep into a kill zone measured down to the centimeter. But mines are only one part of the trap. The more fearsome weapon is the patience and iron discipline of the drone units. While Russian electronic warfare (EW) devices sweep the frequency bands searching for control signals, Ukrainian pilot teams execute an extremely dangerous tactic: radio silence discipline. They do not rush to launch drones into the sky the moment an enemy silhouette is spotted. Instead, they lie in ambush within trenches and inside the ruined structures of Myrnorad. They turn off all broadcasting equipment, keep batteries in a state of peak readiness, and remain absolutely hidden from the streams of Russian thermal reconnaissance drones scouring the area above. They accept a state of temporary blindness, with no connection and no communication, solely in exchange for a single factor: absolute surprise. A true predator never growls before pouncing. They wait until the prey has fully entered the encirclement, where all resistance becomes futile. So, how do they attack when GPS signals are completely neutralized by high-power Russian jamming stations? This is when the creativity of the Ukrainian soldier reigns supreme. They no longer trust flashy satellite coordinates that are easily deceived. Instead, they use visual navigation, a primitive yet astonishingly effective method. Before the battle, pilots memorize every charred tree stump, every collapsed wall, and every broken vehicle on the roadside as visual landmarks. When the FPV drone streaks away, the pilot does not look at a digital map, they look at the scars on the ground to navigate. This is a battle of wits, where manual flying skills and the ability to memorize terrain become the ultimate weapons, piercing through every expensive electronic shield of the opponent. Ask yourself, no matter how thick the armor or how modern the jamming system a tank carries, can it survive when every meter of the road it traverses has already been calculated by the opponent? Ukraine has turned Myrnarad into a giant chessboard, where every Russian move has been predicted in advance. They do not just strike the steel armor, they strike at confidence, at stereotypical operational procedures, and at the very survival instinct of Russian tank crews. The trap has been set, the hunters are in position, and the turtles are plodding into the mouth of the pocket, unaware that with every passing second, the moment of judgment draws closer. When the first light of dawn just broke over Myrnarad, the deadly silence was torn asunder by the roar of diesel engines and the grinding of iron tracks on the shattered asphalt. The Russian convoy began entering the red zone. Leading the way was the Big Boss Turtle, a makeshift armored T-62, carrying a forest of antennas from the most advanced electronic warfare, EW systems on its roof. This was the moment of confrontation between steel, radio waves, and human will. As soon as the convoy reached the boundary of the ambush area, the Russian EW devices simultaneously activated at maximum power. An invisible protective dome was erected, sweeping away all control signals within a radius of hundreds of meters. On the screens of the Ukrainian drone pilots, images began to lag and stutter, with white noise like snowflakes obscuring the targets. Data streams were shredded, and latency skyrocketed. In any traditional war, this would be the moment when drone attacks were completely neutralized, but the Russians were mistaken. Ukrainian pilots, the artists of the sky, had long prepared for this scenario. They no longer looked through high-resolution camera lenses. They switched to manual flight mode, acro mode, controlling the drones based on inertia and visual memories of the terrain. The drone was no longer a smart device. It became an arrow with a will, hurtling through the electronic mist by the pure instinct of the operator. From within the bushes and ruins, two FPV drones carrying RPG-7 anti-tank warheads streaked out like two bolts of lightning. The target was none other than the leading mobile warehouse. The first drone slammed into the front of the add-on armor. A deafening explosion rang out, and fire and black smoke enveloped the front of the vehicle. The giant tank shook violently, but thanks to the additional welded steel armor, it continued to limp along, even though the outer metal sheets were torn like paper. Immediately, the second drone followed up with a strike on the vehicle's flank. An orange fireball flared brightly, and steel fragments scattered everywhere. The turtle still did not stop. The Russian crew frantically floored the accelerator, trying to burst through the kill zone with raw power. The grim persistence of the giant iron mass created a terrifying sense of oppression, but in reality, the EW system on the roof had begun to flicker after the direct impacts. Ukraine did not waste more drones on the thick front armor. The pilot controlling the third FPV was a seasoned veteran. He maneuvered the drone to soar high up, executing a vertical dive from a blind spot that the Turtle Tank's observation system could not see. The target this time was the narrow gap between the turret and the hull, the fatal weakness of any DIY welded structure. The drone slipped through the outer protective steel layer, plunging straight into the neck of the tank. A sharp, concise explosion, not too loud but full of power. The cumulative jet of the shaped charge warhead cut through hydraulic lines and turret control systems. The Turtle began to lose its orientation. It was no longer a mighty war machine, but just a dying mass of iron, spewing white smoke from the cockpit. The drama reached its climax as the convoy approached a narrow bend, wedged between a ruined building and a large mine crater. The Turtle Tank, now heavily damaged, tried to squeeze through to clear the way for the comrades behind. This was the exact moment Ukraine had been waiting for. The 4th FPV, the drone carrying the most powerful explosive charge, dove straight into the rear engine compartment. That was where the armor was thinnest, and the heart of the monster resided. Boom! A secondary explosion of earth-shattering proportions rang out as the diesel fuel and ammunition inside were detonated. A pillar of fire tens of meters high shot straight into the sky through the gaps in the steel shell. The Turtle Tank ground to a halt, standing motionless in the middle of the road, becoming a burning fortress blocking the only path for the entire convoy. The steel shield had now become a deadly obstacle. When the locomotive fell, the disaster scenario began to play out for the following vehicles. The entire line of tanks and armored vehicles behind were bunched up in a cramped space, unable to advance and unable to retreat because both sides of the road were dense minefields. The second tank tried to turn around in desperation, but was immediately pursued by 3 other FPV drones, which tore apart its tracks and turned it into a stationary target. The scene became utter chaos as Russian infantry jumped from the vehicles, fleeing frantically into the sparse woods in hopelessness. They raced against the iron birds scanning overhead. Even Russian interceptor drones were helpless when the number of Ukrainian drones pouring out was too large and overwhelming. The screams of the infantry were drowned out by the continuous pops of ammunition cooking off inside the charred wreckage. The Turtle tanks that were once the hope to pierce through the death zone were now just smoking piles of scrap metal, marking the catastrophic failure of a tactic using thick steel against smart technology. The black smoke from the Turtle Tank did not just stop an attack, it also signaled a permanent shift in modern warfare thinking. The costly lesson on the Pokrovsk battlefield has shown that, in the era of algorithmic warfare, physical armor is gradually becoming disadvantaged against the power of information. Whoever controls the signal, masters the timing, and manipulates, the operational space will emerge victorious, regardless of how many layers of armor the opponent wraps themselves in or how many giant iron masses they possess. The failure of the Russian mobile warehouse formation reveals a harsh reality. When you strip yourself of vision and flexibility, you have already written your own death sentence before the first shot even rings out. We are witnessing an unprecedented arms race. The duel between crude turtle armor and sophisticated anti-jamming drones will continue to escalate fiercely. Is this a stepping stone for us to move toward an era of fully autonomous tanks, controlled by artificial intelligence? Or will the image of armored kings of the battlefield soon become an obsolete relic, fading into the past before the dominance of cheap drone swarms? As for you, what do you think about the Turtle Tank design? Is it a stroke of genius, a courageous stopgap solution in a desperate time, or in reality, just obsolete iron coffins trying to cling to the glory of the past? Leave your thoughts in the comments section below. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the Military Matrix channel so you don't miss our most in-depth and dramatic military analyses. Thank you for watching.